Hello, naririnig po ba?
Yes po.
Okay po. Good evening po, sir. Good evening, classmate. Kami yung Group 1, i-represent namin yung Module 1, Introduction to Trackworks. Sisimulan namin sa introduction ni Clifford.
Ano po? Rinig po ako.
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
Good evening po. Next slide. Introduction. Like any steel bench wheel railway equipment, light rail vehicles must have the ability to switch from one track to another or to traverse intersecting tracks. Special track works refers to the manufactured track elements and accessories required to support and guide the rail vehicle at this place. Next slide, please. So, basically po, yung definition po ng special trackworks is yung mga modified tracks. Gaya po ng modified turnouts and crossovers, track crossing that permit one track to cross another at grade. Next slide. Ladder track layouts where a sense of turnouts are closely grouped to form a continuous entry or exit layout. The restraining rail either bolted to a parallel running rail or supported independent of the running rail, and any type of curve rail, and the compromise rail for transitioning from one rail section to another. Next po.
Hello po, good evening. Ngayon ang pag-usapan po natin yung components ng special trackworks po. Isa po dun is yung switches, which is also called switch point rails or switch point or point rail. These are movable rails that guide the wheel flanges to direct them to the appropriate track. Ito po yung kumbaga extra rails na nag-guide sa train to change direction or to turn po sa mga turnouts po. Parts of switches are point of switch, heel of switch, and stock rails po. Ito po yung point of switch is the end of the switch rail which is farther from the frog, and the point where the spread between the gauge lines of the stock rail and the switch rail is sufficient for practicable switch point. Heel of switch naman po is the end of switch rail which is the farther from its point and nearer sa frog. Stock rails naman po is yung running rails alongside of the switch rails. Yung stock rails po is yung original rails po before nung switches po. Doon naman po tayo sa types of switches. Meron po tayong stub switch which is the earliest type of switch na walang tongue rails and some proportions of the main track is moved from side to side. Ito po yung itsura ng isang stub rail po. Ayun, as you can see po, yung buong, kumbaga yung buong rails po yung gumagalaw instead of meron po siyang switches. Next naman po is the split switch, which is ito na po yung modern type of switch that consists of a pair of stock rails and a pair of tongue rails po.
Hello po, audible naman po ako, no?
Yes po.
Okay po. Hello po, ako po si Matrenzo. Ang parts naman po ito is yung frogs. Next slide please. So ito po yung table of contents ng frog. Next slide. So yun, what is frog? A railroad frog is a piece that allows trains to cross tracks without disrupting traffic from other trains. Essentially, they allow trains to transition smoothly to their own track without ending up in the set they are crossing. So, ano yung frogs, ano rin siya pala, mas kilala siya or mas widely sa English speaking world, mas widely know siya sa obvious term na crossings. And next term. So ayun, why is it called frog? It is believed that the term frog originated due to vague resemblance between the track appliance and the feature on the sole of a horse hoof called the frog. So nakikita nyo naman dun sa picture na tinuturo kung saan yung frog, which is ayun yung parang nagpapakita ng similarities nung railroad frog sa horse hoof frog. And etong term na 'to is dahil sa mga nung mid-19th century kung saan yung mga North American truckmen is parang familiar sila sa horses. And yun, apparently started calling the truck device a frog due to the resemblance of the horse hoof. Next slide. So ito yung short video about po sa kung paano ba nagwo-work yung frog. Pa-play ng vid. Eh,
When the wheels roll through the frog on a turnip, what happens is the wheel rolls along onto the wing rail that's shown in blue here. And it rides along the wing rail until it catches the point of the frog shown in green. Now you can see that at no point is the wheel able to drop into the flangeway, into the gap between the two rails, because it's firmly supported on those two rails. So it just rolls along the wing, catches onto the frog point as it's handed off onto the frog rail, and it rolls through. And because of this geometry, it will ensure that the equipment will roll through the frog without any bumping or dropping into the flangeway in the frog. Now from this, you can see that it's key that the flangeway is as narrow as possible, and the tread of the wheel is as wide as possible to allow that to happen. It allows the wheel to roll down the wing rail, span across onto the frog point, and then roll onto the frog without any bumping. A turnout built close to the NMRA specifications, or right on, as ours are in the fast track assembly fixtures, will maintain all the relationships necessary to give you a smooth running track work when you use wheel sets that are set to the NMRA specs. And most of the newer wheel sets available today, right out of the box, are compliant. However, little track work is. Now I'm also going to show you the same thing with the RP-88 or Code 88 wheel sets running on a turnout built to the same specifications. Now you can build a turnout to different specifications to work well with RP-88 wheels, but
So ayun, napakita naman siguro ng mas okay kung paano ba nagwo-work yung frog. So openings called flangeways must be provided through the top surface of a truck frog so that the flangeways on the vehicle wheels can pass through. The intersection of the gauge lines of the two intersecting rails is known as the theoretical point frog. So makikita naman siya dun sa picture kung saan naka-indicate yung theoretical point of frog, which is yung nasa point A. Tapos ayun yung The theoretical point of frog would be a sharp tip that would quickly wear and fracture in service. Therefore, the intersecting rails are cut back a short distance to a location known as the actual point of frog, where the metal will have enough rigidity to withstand the effects of the service wear. Next slide. So, due to the requirement for the wheel to pass through the open flangeway at the point of frog, the actual point of frog, the wheel's thread and frog wing rail surface locations produce high impact forces, noise, and vibrations. To avoid such problems, it is very important that the wheel will be properly supported during its passage through the open throat area at the point of frog. The width and the wheel thread is critical in this regard. Wide wide flangeways become combined with narrow wheel thread, which could result in loss of wheel thread contact with the top of frog, allowing the wheel to drop in the open flangeway. Next slide. So ito po yung dun sa mga nasabi ko kanina, ito yung design concerns for the many variations of frogs. Next. Ito yung spring frog. Ito yung mga types ng different types ng frogs. Next. Ito naman yung movable point frogs. Next. Then ito yung flange bearing frogs. Next please. And ito yung leaf over or jump frogs. Ayun lang. Thank you.
Ayan. So, hello. Other turnout components. Next. So, ang first natin is closure rail, a segment of fixed rail that is located between the point, or also known as switch, and the frog, also known as crossing, and braces against the running rail to enable train switching. So, another term for closure rails is switch rails or tongue rails. Itong purpose niya is, siya yung dito dumadaan yung train pag magsuswitch siya. Parang ito yung pathway na gumagalaw kung saan dadaan yung train. Kagaya ng nakikita niyo sa picture, ang movement niya lang ay lateral. Next. Guardrails is a small section of rail that runs beside the main rail on the opposite side of the frog. A guardrail, minsan tinatawag siyang check rail, and ang purpose niya is to, as the name suggests, is to guide the railway kapag yung rail, yung train, pag nag-switch siya sa isang direction or nagtuloy. As you can see, may gap siya dyan. Dyan dumadaan yung gulong and yung flangeway. Nandyan yung guardrail para maiwasan natin na mag-derail or mag-collide yung rail kapag nag-train switching at may mga kasalubong siyang ibang rails sa track na yun. Next. Heel blocks are components installed at the switch heel that offers a connection with the attached closure rail as a position for the switch point rail. So, ang heel block, para lang siyang a fixed place, distance, kung saan makikita kung saan nakakagalaw yung switch point rail and kung saan din nag-a-attach yung closure rails. Next. Switch point rail stop. So, na-discuss naman ni Alvin kung ano yung switch point rail. So, ang switch point rail stop naman, ito yung nagsiseparate sa switch point from the rail, sa main rail. So, para siya yung safety feature ng switch point para hindi siya ma-damage or hindi siya ma-damage. Switch operating device, pwede siya maging manual or power operated. Yung kagaya sa video na pinakita ni Gruta kanina, na yung isang tao, manually pinapalitan yung direction ng train. Ganun ang manual. And sa next video, parang mapapakita yung paano gumagana yung power operated na switch operating device. Next.
Railroad track crossing is the most important steering system in the railroad. Railroad track consists of two parallel steel rails set a fixed distance. The standard gauge is 4 feet 8.5 inches. Let's see how it works. This system wheel and rail, which play an important role in the track change process. The inner rim of the wheel, called a flange, is comparatively greater in diameter than the outer part, which prevents the wheel from sliding off the track. Switch rails, or point blades, are the movable rails which guide the wheels towards either the straight or the diverging track. Stock rails are the running rails immediately alongside of the switch rails, against which the switch rails lay when in the closed position. Points operating rods. Points operating machine, also known as a point switch machine or switch motor, is a device for operating railway turnouts, especially at a distance. Crossing. Crossing is a pair of switches that connects two parallel rail tracks, allowing a train on one track to cross over to the other. Check rails, also known as guardrail, laid parallel to a running track to guide the wheels. All these rails are non-movable. Crossing nose. Crossing nose is a device introduced at the point where two gauge faces cross each other to permit the flanges of a railway vehicle to pass from one track to another.
Good evening po. Report ko po yung about sa special track layouts, which is may dalawang types po, yung single crossover and yung isa po double crossover. Yung single crossover po, kagaya po nitong nasa picture, may dalawa po siyang turnout. Bali, ang turnout po, kagaya po ng mga nasabi kanina, is yung entire assembly po na meron pong points, may guardrails, all fixed rails, and yung machine po mismo na ginagamit. Ang single crossover po is also called universal crossover. Next slide po. Ganito po yung kagaya ng sinasabi ko kanina na may dalawa siyang turnout. Isa sa left, isa sa right. Next na po. Ito naman po yung double crossover, also called a scissor crossover. Kasi po para siyang nag-resemble sa letter X. Sa next slide na nga po. Unlike po dun sa single crossover, ang double crossover po ay may 4 na turnouts. And then, dito po, meron po siya nitong crossing or diamond para pong superimposed po siya. Kaya po parang nagre-resemble siya ng letter X. Kaya po siya tinawag na scissor crossover. Yan lang po. Thank you.
So tapos na po sir yung module 1.
So, ilang groups kayo dito?
7 po sir.
Ilang groups? Wait lang.
Sir, excuse me po, bale dalawang PPT po yung re-report namin po, dalawang parts po kasi pati po chapter 2 sa'min po.
Sige, go ahead.
So yun po, good evening po ulit. Ire-report din po namin yung sa module 2 po, which is yung truck structure components po. Ayun. As we know, rail trucks is a structure built for stability and strength. General truck components include the rails, rail fastening system, and ballast, which provides the overall stability and strength. Although pare-pares naman po ng components yung nasa light rail transit and heavy rail metro transit system, meron pong several other types of truck forms for each needs of particular trackway conditions such as public streets, aerial structures, and subway tunnels. Dito sa chapter na po na ito, i-discuss yung lahat ng truck forms and yung components as well as yung various designs and requirements po.
Ayan, so di-discuss naman namin yung rails and yung mga parts niya. Next. Introduction. Rail is a horizontally extended steel rod used as a path for railroad automobiles or other vehicles. So, rail serves as the most significant and expensive component of the railway system. Siyempre, kasi kung gaano kahaba man yung pathway na kailangan, mas maraming railway ang rails ang kakailangan. Next. So, ito yung two types of rails na common ginagamit kapag sa light rail transit, T-rail and groove rail. Hindi ko masyado i-explain since di-discuss din ng ibang kagrupo. Pero T-rail is, it is called T-rail because it resembles uppercase na kabaliktad na letter T and was initially used for ballasted railways. While yung groove rails in North America, it is also called girder rails and was designed to accommodate a specific flangeway that is installed in paved roadways. Yung parang mga rails na nakadikit sa road. Alam ko lang ganun dito sa atin. Pero sa ibang bansa like European countries na
Ang alin po, ma'am?
yung ano po sir, yung mga groove rails, yung nakadikit po sa mga road. Naka-embedded po, mga paved road.
Okay, okay. Sa ibang bansa meron ata nito sa ibang bansa. Sa Pilipinas wala, since wala naman tayong dumadaan sa
Road. Oo
road
po, sir.
na tama.
So, railing. Ang standard ng North America before was 39 feet and nung 1975, nag-expand sila from 39 to 70, 80, and 82 feet. And pagdating ng 2005, some companies were able to construct 400 feet, 400 feet long na T-rail. So, although na nakakagawa na tayo ng mga ganito kahaba na rails, ang problema dito is paano sa transport or ship yung mga rails ito. Ito yung challenges na iniisip or nire-resolve ng mga engineers ngayon. Because transporting ng mga ganito kahaba na rail length requires special equipments and circumstances. And nagawa ito para madikis natin yung continuous welded rails. Next. Joining this, so alam naman natin na sa last subject natin na-discuss tong mga joining rails and ang pinaka-common is yung mga bolted rail, yung may fish plates and bolts or yung mga may clamps. Although common sila, it's considered the weakest part ng railway kasi usually sila yung nakaka-receive ng maraming natatamaan ng gulong and other ng rails. So parang to avoid this problem, ang naisip na solution is weld to weld the railways, the fish plates. Bakit welding? Dahil it eliminates excess materials such as the bolts and fish plates, improves the quality of movement of the rail in the track, and generates less noise. Next. And yung most used welding techniques sa pagkabit ng mga rails is yung electric flash butt welding and exothermic welding or sometimes called thermic welding. Next. So yung electric flash butt welding, ito yung recommended standard for transit track work. Yung kung paano ito nangyayari is, kagaya sa previous picture, may machineries na parang may clamp na didikit sa endways ng rail, kagaya na ito sa picture. May isang fixed and may movable. Sa clamp na yun, may dumadaan na electricity na nag-iinit sa rails. And habang umiinit ito at gumagalaw yung movable electrode, ay magdidikit siya at magiging mag-fuse. After maset nun, ay ipapolish na lang siya at magiging at isa-stick. Next. Although ideal yung electric flash butt welding, may instances na hindi siya magagamit sa pag-connect ng pag-weld ng mga railways, which is yung kung saan hindi mag-fit yung equipment. Usually sa mga steep bends na mga rails, hindi siya magagamit. So kapag may ganung circumstances, ang isa natin gagamitin is yung exothermic welding, which will be explained sa video.
Thermit welding. To understand how thermit welding is carried out, let us weld two railway tracks along their ends using thermit welding. First, pour the hot molten wax between the gaps of the tracks to form a wax pattern. Then install a welding setup around the rail ends as shown. Now bring a box containing thermit mixture, which is basically a mixture of aluminium and iron oxide. The mixture also consists of a very minimal amount of igniting mixture, like barium peroxide. Place this box on top of the welding setup, and then ignite the whole mixture. We see that due to fire, both the aluminium and iron oxide react with each other. As a result, aluminium, which has high affinity with oxygen, reacts with the iron oxide to form aluminium oxide and iron. This reaction is exothermic in nature. Thus, a large amount of heat gets released, and this results in the formation of superheated molten metal, which consists of molten aluminium oxide and molten iron. We see that the molten iron, being heavier, settles at the bottom, and the molten aluminium oxide, being lighter, flows on the top. After some time, the molten iron flows out of the box from the opening present at the bottom of the box and enters the welding setup, which consists of a cavity around the joint. The extra molten iron then moves out of the cavity and falls on the tray. Now leave the molten iron for some time to solidify around the joint. Then remove the box and trays first, and then the welding setup. We see that the solidified molten iron is formed at the joint. Note that the extra iron metal can be removed with the help of grinder.
Ayan, so
Thermit-
ganun ang process ng sa thermit welding. Next. Rail in curves. CWR or continuous welded rails can normally be put down to a 300 foot radius on 115 RE rail without a problem. So, although yung mga rails natin na fairly rigid sila, may mga built-up tension, internal tension yung mga rails na that seeks to straighten the rail. So, ang standard na ginagawa dito is parang piniprecurve yung mga rails. Hindi ako sure kung ano yung mga procedures na ginagawa. Pero may napanood ako is yung mga rails, pinadaan sila sa rail track mismo na may curve. Like nakapatong sila sa isang mahabang train. Tapos dun sila na curve. Railway interface issue. Back. So one of the most critical difficulties that trackwork engineers deal with is optimizing the railway interface to suit a wide range of rolling stock and wheel maintenance circumstances. So yung rail and wheel interface, maraming ang alam ko na issues na madalas na kakarap dito is yung parang noise, excess noise, yung wear and tear niya, and yung mga corrugation. Kapag hindi suited yung wheel design sa rail sa type of rail. Next. So when wheel and rail design that produces vertical construction. Yeah. T-rail, also called Bignol rail. Hindi ko alam kung tama pagka-pronounce ko. Or flat bottom rail. So yung as I previously mentioned, nung una, ginagamit na yung T-rail sa mga ballasted tracks. Pero ngayong mga modern running rails, pwede na siya sa ballasted, direct fixation, and embedded. And noon, there was hundreds na T-rail sections. And dahil sa AREMA, nagkaroon ng 4 standards, which is the 115 RE, 132 RE, 136, and 141. Next. Si Arjen.
Ako naman po, rail section 155 RE. 115 rounded from the exact mass of 114.3757 or yung mass in pounds per 1 yard length ng rail po. RE, yung pong, ito po pala yung sa pangalan niya, yung pong RE galing po sa AREMA, which is the Standard Rail Section. Ang AREMA naman po meaning ay American Railway Engineering and Maintenance of Way Association. So sila po yung parang, isa po silang North American Railway Industry Group na nagpapublish po ng mga recommended na practices or designs para po sa structure sa railway po. Ginagamit po siya sa US and Canada. primary rail section used on North American light rail track system used for railroad construction. This is a Type T section flat bottom rails with a 57 kilograms mass per meter, equivalent to 115 pounds per yard, where its name comes from. So yun nga po, rail section 155R is yung standard po na rail section na ginagamit sa Amerika, mostly po sa North America. Bale, ang sabi po sa, ano po, yung book po ng AREMA, kaya po naging standard na version yung 155RE kasi po siya po yung pinakang popular and pinakang sikat nga po na rail section na ginagamit. So, ibig sabihin po, siya din po yung madaling makakuha po or mabibili kasi yun po yung parang pinakang pinoproduce ng mga ano po, manufacturer. Next po. Sorry po, nag-charge lang. Bale, ito po yung itsura ng 115RE. Ito po yung mga susukat niyo po. Next na po. Rail strength and metallurgy. The current AREMA standards for standard strength and high strength rail hardness developed by the head hardening procedure. So yun pong about po dito sa rail strength and metallurgy. Nasa book din po siya ng AREMA, particularly sa chapter 4 po, pero wala po akong makuhang kopya kasi may bayad po. So yun po, standard rail 321 minimum Brinell hardness number, high strength rail 341 to 388 BHN may be exceeded provided a fully prosthetic microstructure is maintained. So po yung BHN number nga po is Brinell hardness number. So parang test po siya. Sinusukat po kung gaano po katibay ang bakal. The life of the rail can be extended by increasing the rail's resistance to wear, surface fatigue damage, and fatigue defects. Bali, sabi po dito na nasa module, since steel nga po yung ginagamit, and yung alloy po, hindi po masyadong ginagamit kasi mahirap po ata siya i-weld. Next po. Rail straightness. Super straight rail to improve ride quality and reduce noise by providing a more consistent contact band. The straightness of the top surface of the railhead is measured along the center line of the rail at the top. Bale, ang na-search ko lang po dyan is the safest, fastest, most efficient, and economic way to build high-speed railway is to make the track be a straight line type. Next po. Rail running surface finish. Rail is generally delivered from the manufacturer with a bluish to black surface residue called mill scale. Mill scale composed of iron oxides is typically about 1 to 32 inches, 1 millimeter thick, and is a byproduct of the hot rolling process. So long as the mill scale is intact, it provides the underlying steel with an unintended but reasonably effective protective coating from corrosion. So po yung mill scale po, pag dinideliver po yung mga rail, meron po siya mill scale na nakalagay. But then, minsan po, inaalis po siya kasi meron din po siya magiging effect dun sa mismong rail and dun po sa mga vehicles na dadaan. It is customary for rail transit projects to lightly grind the running surface of newly laid rail so as to remove the mill scale and thereby provide a clean and uniform running surface for the wheels. Next po. So, ito po yung example ng pag-aalis po ng mill scale. Next. Pre-curving T-rail. Pre-curving rail essentially requires stretching the rail beyond the elastic limit of the steel so that it cannot spring back to its original straight configuration. These are the general guidelines for pre-curving 115 RET rail. Standard rail, pre-curve rail horizontally for curved body below 300 feet, 91 meters, and pre-curve rail vertically for curved radius below 755 feet or 230 meters. Next. So, isa po sa process na ginagawa pag bibili ka po ng pre-curve na rail na is gag press nga po. But then ngayon po, mas ginagamit na yung roller bending equipment na nag-produce na mas uniform na curve. Ito po nasa picture is pang ano po, yung sa gag press po. Some contractors have brought roller rail bending equipment onto job sites and pre-curved previously welded strings of CWR for immediate installation in track. This method eliminates both the need to craft straight rail ends and the use of termite worlds and can thereby save both time and costs provided the job site provides sufficient room to do the work. Next.
Next naman po is yung groove rail. Groove rail po, tulad ng sabi kanina, is popularly known as girder rail sa North America. Ang kaibahan lang po nito is meron siyang groove. Tapos, commonly used po si T-rail, pero si groove rail naman po is mas preferred na rail section para sa mga embedded trucks po. Yung one side of a flange rail is the head of the railway where the rail vehicle wheel treads roll in the usual manner. On the opposite side of the rail of the flange rail is the thinner segment of the rail steel variously called tram, lip, or guard po. Advantages of groove rail and on embedded trucks. Ito po siya, pero ang pinaka-point lang niya is one, construction cost savings, and two is to achieve easier to achieve high level of electrical isolation po. Available groove rails sections is yung section 67R1, section 56R1, section 62R1, 76C1 po. Ito naman po etong mga section na to ay provided by the European Committee for Standardization doon sa kanilang list na EN 14811 po. Yun po yung European norm specification po nila para sa mga groove rails, and then andun din po nakalist yung kanilang profiles po and yung requirements for manufacturing. Several of these sections are older designs that were kept in the norm. Basically, nagdi-differ lang naman po sila sa dimensions po na ipapakita ko po next slide. Sa section 67R1, mas malaki po yung flange race niya and can easily accommodate AAR wheel profiles and gauges. Sa section 56R1 naman po, may race tram and more closely resembles the former ATAA and AREA girder guardrails than any other groove rail section. However, it has very small gauge corner radius na 6 mm lang po and exceptionally narrow flange ring. Sa 62R1 naman po, ito po yung mostly ginamit sa legacy streetcar po system in North America na may mga maliliit na wheel flanges po. Sa 761 naman po, ito naman po yung tinatawag nila, ginagamit po nila mostly sa construction rail. Ayun po. Ito po yung mga dimensions po ng mga different groove rails po. Ito naman po yung other listed groove rails po doon sa binigay po ng European norm specification po. Yung section 55G1 and 55G2, yung pong pinaka-closest po sa 115RE T-rail po na may base thickness and slope and slopes are radically different than groove railhead profile compatibility with T-rails. When wheel compatibility based on head radii and wheel contact zone is possible if the wheel profile is designed to suit both T-rail and girder rail section. The wheel designer and the track designer must consider the impacts of wheel or rail performance resulting from standard rail sections. Sa former RI-59 and RI-60 rail sections or groove rail were designed to incorporate a 13 mm gauge corner radius The crown of the head was also reprofiled. Together, these changes achieve a close compatibility with the former S49 Vignal rail section, which is 49E1. Isa naman po siyang T-rail. Coincidentally, this change in the groove rail design also made them a reasonably good match with the original design 115RE T-rail when it is installed at a standard of 140. Until 2009, the 115RE rail section includes a 10-inch crowd head radius. That radius is a reasonably good match to popular European groove rail sections that have 11.81-inch crown radius po. Ito naman po yung strength and chemistry ng mga groove rail po. The standard groove rail are produced in many grades of rail steel. Each designation classifies groove rail per chemical composition by percent of mass tensile strength, elongation in percent, and hardness. Hardness is designed as HBW, which is equivalent to the Brinell hardness number. To meet the North American requirements for surface hardness, a groove rail section must have a minimum tensile strength of 1,131, which equates to approximately 340 bhn. A roll rail section with a minimum tensile strength of 1175, having a hardness of 340. Ito po siya yung R340 na GHT sa pinakababa po. Yun po yung minimum requirement po for groove rail po. Higher hardness is difficult to obtain in groove rails since the asymmetric shape of the rail makes it difficult to harden by conventional heat treatment methods. However, at least one European rail manufacturer has developed a proprietary head hardening process for groove rail, categorized as head special hardened, and has a test hardness of about 365 bhn in the rail head and the tram side of the groove section. Ito naman po yung Brinell hardness number po yung BHN na sinasabi ko. For pre-curving of groove rails, meron pong guidelines na sinusunod, which is for horizontal curves, pre-curved groove rail for curved radii below 450 feet. For vertical curves, vertical curve radii below 1,000 feet po dapat. The radius threshold for pre-curving groove rail are generally higher than for T-rail due to asymmetrical shape of the rail, causing it to curl when sprung horizontally. For this reason, it is often necessary to camber groove rail vertically prior to bending it horizontally. The amount of camber will vary by both the rail section and the horizontal radius desired. The direction and the amount of camber will vary depending on the rail section and whether the rail is on the inside or outside of the curve. For procurement of groove rail naman po, may sinusunod po na as guideline, the special provision section for procurement of groove rail should include the following. The ultimate tensile strength of the rail, in particular, the minimum Brinell hardness number at the two wearing surface, the groove rail head, and the tram. The compatibility of welding and providing guidelines as to welding both electric flash bath and thermite welding. Sa pag-procure din po dapat sinusunod din yung pre-curving requirements and yung specific length of rails po. Groove rail is only rolled in Europe since 2010. Kapag may mga projects po sa North America involving groove rail, since malayo, yung handling and transport ng rails are done by multiple parties. It is recommended that specifiers avoid specific handling methods and instead focus on the condition that the rail must be in upon delivery to the project. meron din pong sinusunod na law yung sa pag-procure ng groove rails po sa North America, which is yung Buy America requirements known as 49 CFR 661. It stipulates the products purchased for construction of a federally funded transit project must have been made in the United States unless either one, the item is not made in the United States, or two, the item is not made in the United States in sufficient quantities to satisfy the needs of the project. Procurement of foreign-made products under the exemptions of Buy America requirements must first obtain a waiver from the Federal Transit Administration. Up until 2010, such waivers were routinely granted for procurement of groove rail since no comparable product was made here. However, during 2010, the FTA began to interpret Buy America very strictly, and waivers for groove rail were now being granted. As for this, it is unclear whether this restrictive policy will continue. Project owners that are considering the use of groove rail should be very close. Consider whether their funding mechanism will permit them to do so. Ayun po.
So ayun, nung late regarding dun sa sinabi ni Alwin kanina about dun sa Buy America, late in 2010, as a direct result of the Buy America issue mentioned, it was announced that a variation of groove rail would be manufactured in United States called block rail. And this product effectively eliminates the customary web of the rail and places the head and tram directly to the base of the rail. Next slide, please. So what is block rail? Block rail is a new type of tram track that can be used on both light rail and urban rail transit lines. So ayun yung itsura nung block rail. And next slide, please. So groove rail versus block rail. Ano ba ang pinagkaiba nung dalawa? And ano yung pagkakapares nila? So yung groove rail, as mentioned ni or as discussed ni Alwin kanina, is meron siyang next slide mo nga, please. Thanks. And similar to groove rail, the block rail head portion has a guardrail to keep the wheel from the railing, as well as rail head that carries the majority of the weight of the wheel. The block rail's groundbreaking design eliminates the standard rail tracks rail web framework, allowing the railhead and the rail foot to be joined directly. The weight center of block rail is lowered as a result of absence of the rail web. Next slide. So ito yung pagkakaiba nung dalawa. Yung block rail is yung nasa left and yung groove rail is yung nasa right. So ang nawala sa groove rail is yung rail web, which is yung middle part nung nasa right na figure. So parang tinanggal yung mahabang bakal na yan, tapos ginawa na siyang block rail. Next slide. So there are at least 3 distinct sections of block rail rolled in Europe where it has been used for decades for two purposes. Yung una is fabrication of temporary tracks, particularly temporary crossover tracks that sit on top of existing embedded trackworks. And second is construction of modular embedded tracks using precast concrete panels. And this was fairly common in the former Soviet bloc countries up to through the 1990s, but it is reported to have fallen out of favor with some but not all transit agencies there due to maintenance issues with existing installation. So an initial rolling block rail has occurred at a steel mill in Pennsylvania, and some block rail has been installed on a streetcar project in Portland, Oregon. Next slide. So some industry observers have noted that black rail has a very low section modulus and hence has very limited beam strength because of that black rail likely should be continuously supported so that the sinusoidal wave action response that all rail have to a rolling loads does not result in permanent vertical warping of the rail. And next slide. And rail wear. Next slide. So what is steel rail wear? Rail wear is the separating or cutting of steel caused by friction or an unusually high load. The constant running of the wheels causes the surface head wear, which is amplified by the extra forces produced by braking and traction during deceleration, acceleration respectively. So yung nakikita nyo palang picture dyan, ang tawag dyan is rail profile gauge, which is help to measure cross sections of profiles and provide measurements like head head width and crown radius and helps in comparison with standard profile of the railhead. Rail wear and profile gauge are used for measuring vertical and lateral wear of rails. So ayun yung device, measuring device na ginagamit para malaman kung isa sa dahilan para malaman kung may vertical or lateral wear rails. So next slide. So ano nga ba yung ito yung mga may iba't ibang types ng wear ng rail wear, which is yung isa is side wear. Ito yung nagde-develop on the head of rails as the interaction between the train wheels and side of the rail causes the rail profile to change. So madalas siyang nag-o-occur sa mga sa mga curve kasi next slide please. Ayun. Mas madalas siya nag-o-occur sa mga curved track which is nag-a-add siya ng surface wear where wheel slippage and load transfer occur due to the changing direction of the vehicle track. Gauge comer and eventually gauge face rail wear occur due to the steering function of the rail steering contact is at the outer rail of a curve, which guides the outside wheel of the lead axle. And because of the free play, when the wheel contact is virtually never normal to the direction of this rail, but at a slight angle that is referred to and measured as the angle of attack. Next slide. So ito yung angle of attack, yung sa pag-curve niya. Yung makikita nyo dun sa tinuturo niya. And next. Ayun. Balik mo, please. Wala na palang ano. So ayun, this attack on the outer rail is not caused by vehicle centrifugal force but by the constant change in track alignment that result in changing the vehicle's direction. So ayun, parang yung wheel is nag-a-act siya as cutting tool or grinding stone that actually tawag ba doon? Parang tinatapyasan yung mga or parang nagkakaroon or ito yung isang mga cause para magkaroon siya ng side wear. Kaya yung nakikita niyong picture kanina dun sa railhead is paano siya, lumubog siya dahil dun sa free play na nangyari. And next slide please. So vertical wear, the wear that develops at the top of rail's head is referred to as vertical wear, and the top of railheads are deteriorated and damaged vertically. Wala di. So ayun, the wheel-rail interaction causes the rail and steel surface to deform at the point of contact due to the concentrated load, and this contact pressure is extreme to the point where the stress is greater than the yield point of the rail steel, which causes plastic deformation of the surrounding surface steel. Wala yung picture na ano. Ito pala. So, ayun, yung vertical wear is yung nasa top part nung picture, which is yung parang na lumubog or natapyasan dahil sa pag-deform niya dahil dun sa heavy load ng mga rail tracks. Then yung nasa baba yung lateral wear or side wear, which is yung nag-cause na mag-deform uli siya. And next slide. So, ayun, types of wear, which is yung isang or yung last type of wear, which is corrugation wear. On the top surface of rails or the surface of conjunction part between top surface and side wear, there occurs an even but regular corrugation shape of wear, which can be generally divided into long corrugation wear and short corrugation wear. Corrugation of rail severely impacts ride quality and it creates noise generation. So, kita nyo naman siya sa picture, yung nasa gitna is yung hindi pa nagkakaroon ng corrugation and yung nasa left na na meron siyang long corrugation wear, yung nasa right is yung short corrugation wear. Kakaroon siya na parang maliliit na dimples. And next slide. So, wear resistance rail. Next. So, wear resistant rails is the cumulative wear limits of rail heads and or gauge face. Transit system have historically experienced issues with worn rails and necessity for rail replacement. To combat the wheel machining of rail gauge, face and loss of metal, an abrasion-resistant steel is required, and improvements in the chemical composition and treating process of rail steel have led to development of wear-resistant grade steel. So research has shown that a fine grade of tempered pearlitic steel with sufficient hardness with resistant to both wear and abrasion of the steel and formation of corrugation formation of corrugations. So next, so ano ba yung pearlitic reel steel? Yung pearlitic reel steel is widely used in heavy haul railway all around the world. And because it does not contain any major alloying elements presents a low production cost, it has relative good mechanical properties and wear resistance. And prior to the development of harder grade steel, proprietary processes for head hardening groove rails were sometimes used to provide a more wear resistant surface to the rail. For example, a special surface weldment known as reflex, which also featured an anti-squill characteristic, was popular within was popular in circa 2000. However, reflex and similar processes were expensive. Such post-manufacturing treatments are now seldom used as more wear-resistant grids and grooves rail are readily available directly from the rail mills. Next slide.
Track design and construction. Next slide, please. Track design is the calculations of parts of the railway track that are needed to be precise in dimensions and compatible to the rail. The desirable attributes are balance stiffness and resiliency, resistance to permanent deformation, stability, and adjustability. Next. The track and wheel gauges and flangeways. Choosing the appropriate measurement for the track gauge, wheel gauge, and flange widths is a critical step in track design process. If the design dimensions are not carefully selected to be compatible with the rail vehicles the, that will operate over the track, unsatisfactory performance and excessive wear of both the track structure and the wheels will occur. Next slide. The standard track and wheel gauges. Gauges of a railway track is defined as the clear distance between inner faces of two tracks. The distance between inner faces of the pair of wheel is called the wheel gauge. The majority of contemporary rail transit systems normally utilize the standard track gauge of 56% inches or 1,435 millimeters. Generally, the types of railway track gauge can be divided into the standard gauge, the narrow gauge, and the broad gauge. The most common gauge is the standard. The narrower gauge are called the narrow gauge, while the wider are the broad gauge. The track gauge can be adjusted along the route so as the optimized vehicle-to-truck interaction. The vehicle-to-truck interaction is paramount to any railway to ensure that derailment are prevented and optimum ride quality is maintained. Next slide, please. So, when nga po, yung narrow gauges narrower than the standard gauges. These gauges are mainly used for the hilly area and the place where traffic volume is low. Next is the meter gauge. If the distance between the inner faces of two rail is 1 meter, the gauge is called meter gauge. Next is the broad gauge, which is the wider than the standard gauge. Next, please. Next is the selection of gauge. Marami pong factors na pwedeng pagbasehan para sa pagpili po ng gauge, which is yung una is the cost of construction. Next is volume and nature of traffic. For heavier loads and high speed, the wider gauge are required because subsequently the operating cost per ton per kilometer is less for the higher carrying capacity. Next is the development of the areas. Narrow gauges can be used to develop in the thinly populated areas by joining the underdeveloped areas with the developed areas. Next is the physical features of the country. In hilly areas, poor areas, and lightly traffic areas, use narrow gauges is the right choice. Next is the speed of the movement. Speed of train is proportional to the gauge. Speed is the function of wheel diameter. Wheel diameter is generally 0.75 times of the gauge. So for maintenance of high speed, the broad gauge is preferred. Next po. The transit gauge practice. Traditional street railway or tramway systems develop guidelines for the wheel gauge that differ considerably from guidelines used by railroads. In United States, 1,435 millimeters and 1,428 millimeters is the most common standard for gauges. These are promulgated by the American Electric Railway Engineering Association. As for our country, noong 2016 po ay na-approve na ng NEDA ang adoption ng standard rail para sa mga future rails natin. NEDA says the use of the standard gauge in place of 1,067 millimeter gauge will provide the better choice of technology from international suppliers and enable higher operating speed. At doon na tatapos yung report po namin. Salamat po.
Yun, tapos na po, sir. Thank you po.
Ano? Okay. So yung naging discussion is about dun sa introduction and basic clock structure components, which includes the rail, more on rail and fishbolt, then turnouts yung kanina.
Yes po.
So dun sa kanina naging discussion nyo, may type of rails na dalawang klase, isang yung T-rail then yung groove rail. May other types din dito based on appearance nila. Tulad din ng double-headed rail na hindi naman na ginagamit sa ngayon and bull-headed rail. Ah, wait lang, mag-share ako ng screen. Yan, additional lang dun sa naging discussion, ito yung mga images nung other types of rail, double-headed rails. From the name itself, dalawa yung head niya, baliktaran lang. Bull-headed rail, then yung pinaka-common na ginagamit, flat-footed, or yung tinatawag na T-rail. Then, based on standards, different standards, tulad ng AREMA, meron ding standard na sinusunod pagdating sa classifications ng rail or once na pinoprocure mo na ito. Merong UIC 60, merong standard sa UIC, merong sa European standard, merong AREMA, merong Japanese standard. Meron din itong iba't ibang mechanical properties sa chemical properties. So may question si Sir Valderrama, sa Philippines sir, ano pong standard sinusunod natin? For different railway operators po, different din yung ginagamit. Kaso dahil nagkaroon ng mga projects, yung mga existing na ongoing projects ngayon, standard gauge, standard na tawag dito. Ang question mo sir, tama yung tungkol dun sa rail, di ba? Pag tungkol kasi sa rail, depende dun sa railway operator. Depende kung saan yung approve nila or kung saan sila attached na ginagamit. Pwedeng UIC yung ginagamit nila, UIC 60, UIC 54, JIS 37. Yun yung mga common dito sa Pilipinas. Yung JIS 37, ginagamit ni PNR. Di ko sure ang alam ko yung UIC 54 ang ginagamit ni MRT eh. Then for other projects, yung funded ng Japan, alam ko JIS ang sinunod doon kasi nga funded sila ni Japan. Yung standards niya is Japanese standard. So yung pinagsundan lang ng topic is dun sa module, tama?
Opo, sir.
So add ko lang kasi may di rin kasama dun sa sa discussion. Share screen lang ulit ako. So included din dun. Teka, hindi ko pala. So included din as part ng mga truck components yung railway sleepers, rail fasteners. Pero first muna natin itong railway sleepers. Ito yung nag-hold dun sa rail. Commonly siya yung second in line na sumasalo nung load or yung bigat ng dumadaan na rolling stock. So ito yung mga basic functions niya, basahin nyo na lang. Di pala ako nagpakilala sa inyo, no? By the way, I'm Vince Urbano from Philippine National Railways. Ako yung nag-sit in for as professor niyo muna for today. Palit lang kay Kim. Kasama niya rin ako sa trabaho. Then professor din ako sa 4-3 naman na section. So yun lang. So yung rail sleeper, meron ding iba-ibang classification. Merong wooden, concrete, steel, cast iron, saka composite sleeper. Base lang ito kung saan yung material na ginamit. Yun lang yung magiging tawag sa kanya. Then commonly yung wooden sleeper, prone sa fire, then the rest hindi. Yung cast iron, composite, steel, medyo pricey siya. Yun lang yung term dun. Then concrete yung ginagamit natin. Kaso hindi siya ginagamit sa mga bridges. Ang common na ginagamit yung magagaan lang tulad ng wooden sa composite. Next is yung rail fasteners. Rail fasteners, ito yung nag-hold doon sa rail and sa sleeper. Consist ito ng rail anchors, rail tie plates, chairs, fasteners, spikes, screw, and bolts, etc. So ito yung mga sample nila. SKL type rail fastening system, E-type, E-clip fastening system. Ito yung mas common na nakikita. Isa pang common is yung track spike or yung rail spike na tinatawag. Parang pinapako mo lang yung rail doon sa sleeper. Common na ginagamitan nito is yung mga wooden ties natin or wooden sleeper. Then KPO type rail fastening system. So yun lang. Any questions?
Mukhang wala naman na po, Sir Vince.
Sino nag-check ng attendance nyo?
Ako po, sir.
Sige, sige. So, kung wala nang tanong, dismiss na tayo. Nag-take pa kayo ng screenshot pala?
First meet pa lang po namin dapat ngayon kay Sir Kim kaso wala din po, Sir Kim.
Ah,
Pero mag-screenshot po tayo.
sa subject na to?
Opo, first ano pa lang po sana.
Sige. So, check na lang ng attendance din. Magpa-take ng screenshot siguro.
Sige.
Thank you.
Guys, open cam kayo.
Open cam kayo.
So, screenshot na ako. 1, 2, 3, smile. Okay na po, sir. Thank you po.
Thank you po, sir.
Sige.
Thank you po, sir.
Thank you po.
Thank you po, sir.
Thank you po, sir.
Thank you po, sir.